Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, we are thrilled to welcome you. For those of you I don't know, I'm Lisa Koenigsberg. I am the president and founder of Initiatives in Art and Culture. And this is the fourth in a series of monthly webinars that we have organized collaboratively with De Beers. And we are delighted to have you with us. This is a bit of a special edition, if you will, because today we will have two panels and then a small presentation of our award. I want to take just a moment to express profound thanks to De Beers for their extraordinary collaboration and engagement. It has been a really great experience, and we look forward to marching onward. So other remarks I will save for later so that we can jump right into this panel. And one of the things that is so great about today is that it allows us to think about what we all envision for tomorrow in an eco-dependent world where we have at times conflict over cultural patrimony, natural resources, but there is, if you will, no going back. And so today we have the opportunity to look in effect at where we are, to look back actually, to see what has been accomplished, to see where we are, and also to talk a bit about what we collectively envision for the future. I am actually thrilled to bits to welcome the panelists who are joining us this morning for the conversation entitled No Going Back, Supporting Responsible Mining in the Jewelry Supply Chain. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to greet everybody as I see you on my screen. So that is the order that is governing my introductions. So Virginie Baron, who is the head of corporate affairs from Valcambi. Connie Havel, who is the supply chain and markets head at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, ARM. Monica, would you give all of us a lesson, please, in the appropriate pronunciation of your name?
Oh, thanks, Lisa. I am Monica Geshuhi.
Geshuhi.
Yeah,
okay.
Fair enough.
She is, non, je vais essayer. She is the founder of the African Gem Exhibition and Conference. And I also refer all of you to the biographies that are available on the website for this event so that you can familiarize yourself with the very distinguished careers that each of our panelists not has had, but is having and will go on to even greater heights. Next is Cristina Villegas, who is the head of Mine to Markets at PACT and has done wonderful things. Then Feriel Zerouki, Senior Vice President, Corporate Affairs, De Beers Group. And finally, Uta Decker, who is I'll say pioneering jeweler, combining a sculptural vision with a commitment to using responsibly sourced materials and handling the materials herself. And then I'm really delighted to turn you over. I'll be commenting now and then, but to our moderator, Christina Miller. Christina was the co-founder of the organization Ethical Metalsmiths. That is an important voice in the conversation. And she now has an independent consultancy, and she is someone whose perspective I value enormously, and a person of great integrity. So welcome, everybody. Such a distinguished group of women. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel with everyone and to be guiding us along. We've all worked very hard to ensure that we have a breadth of questions. As you can see, we have a diverse array of perspectives, from very large corporations to small independent design, and the many efforts that exist in the middle to ensure that the materials that are used in the jewelry industry are responsibly sourced, or pushing ever more increasingly toward equity for all. And so today we're going to try to unpack that a bit and understand what that means depending on where you stand in the supply chain, and the various nuances between the scale of one's operation. So it's important, as we all work to build trust, not only from one end of the supply chain to the other, but even between each other at those various linkages. And the only way we can really do that effectively is to continue talking with each other and understanding the way that we personally and as businesses and organizations interpret and then express the way that that work is carried out in the world. So we thought we would start a little bit by framing our definitions, right? Which is always a really complicated topic. What do we understand responsible sourcing to mean? Generally, we want to move ever more to a equally shared definition of what responsible sourcing means, what it should mean, what we strive for it to mean. But on real practical terms, with Ute Decker in the space here with us, she has worked hard both within her business and within her efforts to continue educating the independent jewelry community about responsible practices. So I'm turning to you, Ute, to help us understand, what is central to your vision around the use of responsibly sourced materials, and what does that term mean to you in your practice?
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you for organizing this fantastic panel. And I very much look forward to hearing from the other speakers later on what they are really doing on the ground. Now, for me in my studio, I have a background in political economics. I worked as a journalist in news for a while. So the idea of looking behind the obvious, doing your own research, digging deeper is something that I brought into my jewelry practice. Now, you touched on three very important concepts: the kind of relationship between vision, responsible sourcing, responsible materials, and artistic expression. Now, I want to create pieces that are beautiful. But I don't want those pieces just to be beautiful on the outside. I think for me, it is the inner beauty that is really very important. Just like similar to a person, you can see an outer beauty, but really it is the inner beauty that is of importance, that is the essence that makes the outer beauty shine. So I think in the jewelry industry, we have for far too long ignored the really ugly inner beauty of the narrative that we're giving the beautiful piece of final jewelry then. And that narrative really is very ugly, the background. And one could even say, well, maybe we shouldn't even make any jewelry. It's superfluous. Who needs it? But on the other hand, we as humans have throughout millennia needed, wanted to express ourselves through body adornment. They are a means to express beliefs, there are means to express affiliation, there are means of rites of passage, and so many more means that I think jewelry is an important part of us humans. Maybe now it's more women who wear it, but throughout it used to be women and men using those signifiers. And that it is a signifier jewelry. And it is both to express our individuality, but also to express our common humanity. And it's those connections that I'd also would like to make with my jewelry. I want the beauty of the piece to be inside as well as outside. Now, what does it mean in practice, responsibly sourced? Now, I'm not very keen on all those terms, ethical jewelry, responsible jewelry, sustainable jewelry. I don't think we have found the right terms yet. And we're all searching for it. So I'll call it ethical jewelry, even though I'm not really very happy with that term. So what does responsible sourced mean in practice for me? I have it relatively easy because I don't work with gemstones. And so I use fair trade gold. And for me, my gold can be traced all the way back to the a small artisanal mining cooperative in the highlands of Peru, to my bench in central London. So there is full traceability. I know exactly where my gold comes from. Now, Fairtrade Gold has very good standards. They were introduced 2011. Fairtrade Gold was introduced the first in the world in the UK. And I was one of the very first makers in the world to use Fairtrade Gold. And Fairtrade Gold, as well as Fairmine Gold, sorry, it was initially introduced as Fairtrade and Fairmine Gold, of course. They have now parted company, but they both have very similar standards. And those standards are meaningful and empowering standards. And it's along the full supply chain. I think that is very important. We have full transparency and we have complete traceability of the materials. And that really is the basis for any claims. That's the basis so we know what we're actually using. And this is the basis for making a powerful as well as empowering piece of jewelry. Now, there are very practical definitions you might want to apply, and working out standards is really very challenging and difficult, as we will no doubt later hear. But I think as a guiding principle, I'd like to use a quotation attributed to Gandhi. It's be the change you want to be in the world, be the change you want to see in this world. And therefore, if I want to see a world full of dignity, responsibility, equity, I have to be part of that. And that's what it means for me to source responsibly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ute. It's a lovely opener. And moving into kind of the next question, you touched on standards. So in a way, a standard is a definition, right? It's a big, long, detailed definition of what something can qualify as being responsible, depending on the label. And then it can also be verified. That's part of the role of a standard. But getting standards out into the most marginalized people around the world is another story. It's a little bit more complicated. And so I'd like to turn to Cristina Viegas on this one. many people that are going to be listening have now heard over and over again about OECD, right? So now we're leaping from fair mind and fair trade, which is a very specific, to something that's very large. This is an internationally accepted standard that came about for a variety of reasons. But Christina, I'd love for you to kind of unpack how an international standard like that makes its way into communities in reality. And what are we learning from these kinds of programs in terms of conflict, in terms of environmental protections, in terms of human rights, et cetera? So give us an example or unpack it how you wish.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be part of this panel. As some people might know on this call, PACT has been implementing what's called conflict-free minerals programs in Eastern DRC, Eastern Congo, for about 10 years now. And we've been using the OECD DDG. It's a big, long name, but OECD DDG. For about 10 years. We're, I think, the only system that's fully aligned and at scale. And we cover 3 materials. Now, Eastern DRC is a war zone, many conflicts within it. So it's a very complicated program. We cover about 2,000 mine sites, 80 to 100,000 artisanal and small scale miners across Eastern DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, and elsewhere. That program is fully traced from mine to exporter to smelter to manufacturer. And the reason it's such a complicated system is because, again, DRC is a war zone. But most ASM systems don't have to be that way. Most artisanal and small scale miners, people using shovels and picks and human strength to dig minerals out of the ground, that's artisanal. People using excavators and bulldozers, that tends to be small scale. Then you have large scale, which is a different area altogether. Most artisanal and small scale miners are just trying to make a living. They're either working individually or in small groups. And so we've implemented this very tight system in Congo because the international community was quite frankly scared to source from that place. So when we think about approaching sourcing, we have to separate into kind of 2 categories: conflicted places and everywhere else. And so if your gems, diamonds, and gold are coming from, I guess, difficult places like Afghanistan, like Central African Republic, like Venezuela, like Burkina Faso, then you absolutely need that kind of assurance to help determine that you are not part of the problem by buying those materials and benefiting armed groups. But if your gems, gold, diamonds come from another place, you still have a responsibility, but you need to start asking your suppliers for details based on that place. So I often say that traceability, specifically just to a country, is a very first step in getting to your supply chain. And the OECD DDG guidance is a tool to get to know your supply chain and get better over time. That's how you should think about it. So if you're sourcing from Brazil, for example, you need to start asking your suppliers, where are they working? What's the nearest town? What's the nearest city? And if it's the middle of the Amazon, you have a responsibility to ask, what are they doing about the environment? And ask for evidence. And look for photos on rehabilitation practice and compare the geotag to their claimed location, at the very least. And be part of the solution. So the OECD DDG does not say disengage when there's a problem. It actually says the opposite. It says lean in when there's a problem. And so, get details and work with those suppliers. And this can be holding fundraisers to help them be better. It can be just staying with them as they get better. But one of the lessons learned over time is that we all have a role to play. And, as Ute said, and I think this makes it more exciting, more creative process to make sure the jewelry supply chain gets better over time, because we all have a responsibility and we can all be creative with that. So if you're sourcing from a conflict zone, you have an extra responsibility. But if you're not, you have a responsibility to make things better anyways. One lesson learned is that the programs that have worked and have reached scale are those that have worked within existing systems. So they're not trying to create a whole new supply chain. They're working within existing supply chains. And this makes everybody be able to lean in on what they can control. So the exporter can tell you where he or she is sourcing. Those local brokers can tell you a little bit about the mine site and send you pictures. What does not work is when outsiders kind of parachute in, try to work in a place they don't know, and try to work on an industry they don't know. So with Moyo Gems, for example, and we'll discuss it later, we've worked within the existing supply chain, including existing miners, existing brokers, existing exporters, existing traders, to make that system work. So it's actually a very exciting time if you think about it. And let's not think about big fancy supply chains that you have to pay a lot of money for. Change does take money, it takes time, but we all are part of that change.
Thanks. And real quick, I'm curious if you would consider this work still to be in its nascency. Are we still at the beginning?
We are very much at the beginning. I want to just praise, like I always do, Fairmind and Fair Trade for really leading the way and showing us what's possible. Connie has heard me say this a million times. I love ARM. They can do no wrong. They have really, they really innovated and showed us what was possible. And then Fariel's effort on diamonds, it's remarkable. And we should celebrate that and learn from it and expand it. And with Moyo, Ute said, I can call myself ethical because I don't work with gemstones. Well, Moyo Gems now exists, and Virtue Gems now exists, and that's within the last 2 years. And so now people who want to be on the cutting edge of ethical practice have options that they can support, they can help us improve, and help us scale. And the way you do that is by buying from the program. So I'm going to do a shameless plug, moyogems.com. Sorry. I'm American, I can't help myself.
Thanks, Christina. It's a really beautiful, oh, go ahead, Ute.
No, I've just said it's easier for me because I've only got the metals, but no, absolutely, Moyo Gemstones is up there.
And Christina, you gave us a great handoff to Connie. And so, you with ARM has been at this for a long time. And, Christina was addressing the fact that what's the responsibility of the purchaser of the materials, kind of looking down the supply chain, and what are the steps that they need to take to ensure that they're not supporting conflict, for example. But then the work of ARM is very much about how do you also empower the miner? Like, does the miner want this kind of scrutiny into their activity? Do they want support from upstream? How does that then manifest on the ground? So, one of the big challenges, how do we broaden this? How do we broaden the support for responsible sourcing initiatives? And in the case of ARM, for gold coming from artisanal and small scale mining communities. So I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit, how you think we might further expand support for initiatives like Fairmind.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Lisa, for the invitation to participate on this important panel. I've been repeating this message a lot, and not just myself. Fortunately, in all these webinars that have been taking place throughout this year, I saw that there has been progress, and I feel that there is more support for artisanal small-scale mining than it has been years before. So I feel that now in every webinar, you have the topic artisanal small-scale mining, the importance of being inclusive, to engage. So at least it's on the agenda and people are talking about it, which I feel that years ago was not yet taking place, and there was more the like ignoring this sector, trying to ignore it. Of course, there is a big challenge of the sector is the bad image, the high risks that are associated with this sector, the high potential negative impacts, economic, social, and environmental impacts, and companies fear that they are not able to control these risks, and that it's also not worth it due to the low quantities that we get out of ASM. So many companies prefer to disengage or focus on other strategies to avoid hassling and facing these issues. And there are also other challenges like the price. So normally sourcing from ASM is more costly, as we are talking about smaller quantities, then shipping smaller quantities, maybe refining it separately, just adds costs to the whole process, which makes it more complex. So in general, one of the main challenges that I've identified in my work with the miners and the market throughout all these years is that normally it's more complex, time-consuming, and costly to buy from ASM. And I see this as the big main challenge to engage. So there are companies that want to engage, so now they know they should engage, because nearly all the frameworks say that you should be inclusive, but still there is this this challenge to of the cost and benefit, right? So many refiners, for example, which are very important to link the mining sector with the jewelry sector or the financial sector, say that they don't really gain when they source from ASM. So they just do it when the clients ask for it and they pay extra for it. So there is no incentive really for the market to engage. But engagement is really what's the most important point. Because we can't scale up our initiatives if there is not demand for the gold. An example with Fairmine, for example, we have 9 Fairmine certified mining organizations now in Colombia, Peru, and Mongolia. If these mines are not able to sell all the gold as Fairmine certified gold, I mean, they have been working often years towards certification, have invested a lot, have been very committed to doing this because they expect a benefit out of it, right? At the end, they expect to sell to be able to sell the gold at a better price. So when they are not able to sell their gold with the Fairmine premium and receive this market incentive, they will drop out of the initiative. They will tell other miners these certifications then don't work, so don't even bother, and they will go back to business as usual and sell to informal buyers locally. But if they have a positive experience, they will spread the word in the regions, and more miners will get engaged. So and when we have a critical mass of these miners that are engaged in these kind of programs, then we can find or work on finding synergies to be able to establish more efficient supply chains, better logistical setups, better like transport routes and so on. There's always the demand for local or national aggregators that buy from many ASM communities and then deliver to one refiner, for example, so that the refiner doesn't have to buy from 15 different ASM mines, right, which is much more difficult for them. But to do that, we need a critical mass of miners and not have one mine here and one mine there, which makes it much more difficult. So each engagement is really the key, and this is also the key to scale these kind of initiatives up. So we invite the industry to campaign more, even more for the inclusion of artisanal small-scale mining and support the ASM initiatives on a broader scale.
Thanks so much, Connie. It's interesting, some of the voices that are often most able to be the loudest because they are least encumbered by other circumstances are the independent jewelers. They make their own decisions. They can say what they want. They run their own companies. They just say it. And so they are very much in favor often of this direct to source. There is a kinship between the artisan maker and the artisan miner that is an easy line to draw. However, for scale to occur, have that piece, because that's a really important voice in ongoing communications around these topics. But the aggregation that you're describing to get materials out in scale and ultimately support the artisanal miners is critical. And Virginie, we're coming to that. So I just wanted to prep that note so we make sure we get it. Before then, for Monica, so we've heard a bit about gold. You are primarily working in gemstones, bringing artisanal miners together from across the continent of Africa, not just one particular country or region. But you also are very familiar with the specifics on the ground. So when a standard, when a definition is applied locally, what should we all be more aware of when it comes to the realities on the ground and how we are, as literally, we're all external supporters of this. What should we know more about when it comes to how standards play out on the ground from your perspective?
Thanks, Christina, and thanks, Lisa, for inviting me to join this conversation. And particularly because most of the time conversations are had in different spaces in the Western countries. And there are very few opportunities where we, the source countries, particularly in Africa, are able to plug in into conversations and to share views and opinions, on various initiatives that are being done. And by way of answering your question, Christina, I'd want to maybe just explain and tell a little story of what we're trying to do in Africa, where we have been working with artisan miners, trying to assist them in different ways. I'll not paint the picture of artisan miners. I think Christine has already explained a bit, and most of you are familiar with the artisan miners. And of course, working with artisans and also working with women within the artisanal space as well. And trying to find out with the many challenges that they face, what can we do immediately without using too much resources, which we didn't have. And one thing artisans always wanted was we need markets. We need market for this product. What they produce and not consumed. And these precious stones are not, it's not a priority for them. It's not what they want to consume. It needs to go to the market where they should be consumed. And we were trying to, in helping them say, how do we bring people to buy from these artisans in the simplest and the quickest and without limitations? I think that's sort of the back of the Africa Gem Exhibition and Conference, just organizing platforms to have people come buy from artisans. And what happened, interestingly enough, Christina, 2 years ago when I was organizing our first forum in Kenya, I got to learn about the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference, which was very interesting because the way gemstones were sourced from Africa, producing countries traditionally, this notion of responsible sourcing had not caught on. We did not know what this is, what is different. Everybody buying from artisans in Africa it was all about get the best prices, which meant the lowest price from the miner, and move on, right? And information asymmetry is what reigned in how sourcing is done. Miner knows as little as possible. You get the cheapest price possible, get the stone out, and go sell it to the highest bidder, to the regions and places where they are known. So when I got hold and got to know about jewelers who become very woke and are talking about responsible sourcing, I was very curious because it was also the last time I got to learn about this notion and this wording. And I reached out and I said, hey, what is responsible sourcing? Because it's a terminology that is coming from the US, from the Western world, and we, the producing countries, who are the source, nobody had explained or reached to tell us a new way and a new wave of people who want to do business in a different way. And, you know, come closer, are interested in the faces of the producer, the face of who is this miner, carry the story of this is a miner, carry the pain of this is a miner, want to reward their prices, you know. And this curiosity reached out, and I think I shared Christina and Will, and we wanted to bring a group of buyers out to Africa and about what is responsible for you. Who are you? I mean, do you want to come to Africa and tell people what you want to do differently? What narrative are you trying to do? And why should we want to sell this group of jewelers and this group of new thinking designers? Why would we want to sell to you more than the traditional buyers who've come to buy from Africa? You know, what is the change narrative? And I realized, again, like all other initiatives, and Christine, I think I have said this before, the craft initiatives, I've said this to OECD. It comes from up there, then it's brought to us in Africa, right? Without engagement, which is the same with responsible sourcing. We got to hear about it on the corridors, if you like, as people are, you know, and there was no engagement to tell the source countries what is responsible sourcing. How do you want to do business? When you tell them they want a story, what story? You know, why do you want to see the hardship of a miner? What is the benefit to the miner to be able to tell you their story, you know, and carry that along? And that's what we aim to do, bring and break down these terminologies, this way of how and bring it home. Yes.
Monica, I can tell your message is wonderful. It's a really important one for us to be hearing. And your connection is really choppy. So I don't know if is everyone on the panel, I'm seeing your faces just nod real quick. You're hearing it the same as I am? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we just pause a minute, let me move on to another panelist. Absolutely zero disrespect to what you're saying. I'm hanging on the edge of my seat, but maybe there's something that our tech support can do to help ensure your connection is good, and then we'll come back. Okay. Okay. So Hugo will let me know. Of course, my system signed me out in the pause. Okay. So we'll come back to Monica once we have a green light on her connection. And we were segueing next to kind of the ideas for the formalization of the ASM sector, large scale, small scale relationships, and what some of the challenges have been and what some of the solutions are to those things. So I'd like to take this to Feriel. Maybe while Monica gets connected, you can speak to Sierra Leone, in fact, and your experiences there. So, what in particular, what does the role of the diamond industry need to play to support the formalization of the ASM sector?
Thanks, Christina. And thank you to you and Lisa for having me here today with such a wonderful group of panelists. As you were talking about connection issues, a huge thunderstorm just hit my area. So I hope that you can hear me, well. Yeah, good. Okay, so, my view is that the artisanal mining sector is part of the industry. It's not, separate from the formal sector. It is also the only source of income for millions of people. So it's really important to ensure that it's not left behind. And there are many challenges, yes, okay, but equally there are huge opportunities to deliver meaningful progress when it comes to the livelihoods and the working conditions of the mining communities. You know, us at De Beers, we launched a pilot project, I think it's been 3 years now, and it's called GemFair in Sierra Leone, as you mentioned, to get a better understanding of the sector and also of these challenges. Our ultimate goal is to create a secure route to market for ethically sourced, artisanally mined diamonds. And it sounded super simple, you know, it's a nice little clean sentence as an objective, but it requires so many different phases for delivery. So, you know, phase 1 was setting up the business in Sierra Leone, you know, making sure that you understand the legal framework, getting the licenses, opening a bank account. Opening a bank account is such a big challenge when you're talking about ASM and diamonds. It wasn't easy. Once we'd done that, we started engaging with the communities. So shout out to the Sierra Leone team for all of the community engagements, and also to Ruby for working with the miners to understand the challenges and their needs, but also the challenges that we see on the ground, and then mapping it out with all of the incredible existing standards that, you know, that are already focused on the artisanal mining sector. And we developed a program that we felt would work, you know, for diamonds. We then wanted to secure the integrity of the product, right? And provide everything that everyone wants, you know, full traceability, provenance story, origin, but also secure the product and ensure that, you know, we have a mechanism in place that would address any potential infiltration from diamonds, you know, artisanally mined diamonds that did not come from one of the participating members. And it had to work offline, online, because, you know, the miners are off the grid most of the time, and maintain traceability through, you know, post-export. So we've delivered that. And now we're in phase 4, and we're actually doing a lot of research on the best route to market that would give this project the best chance at becoming a sustainable solution. So what is the right sustainable model? And this is really where we see the wider role that industry can play in. So look, this has been a huge investment, but we're really talking about small volumes. That's the nature of artisanal mining. Retailers and designers, they really need to better inform themselves of the realities of the sector and the engagement and the investment that is required to deliver this type of development. It would be great if we can see, for example, demand for this type of product through the willingness to engage and pay a premium for these goods to help the sustainability of these efforts. We don't really see that, to be honest. An investment needs to happen into ASM if we want to change the narrative. The picture of an artisanal mine and an artisanal miner, it is that. It's a shovel and a sieve, and sometimes it's in riverbanks. That's the reality. But, you know, consumers don't want to see it. Designers don't want to see it. It is the reality. This investment actually needs to go specifically into sustainable and commercially viable schemes that is going to allow the miners to benefit through a fair price and improved livelihood to get out of this situation. Because currently, what I see is, at least from my experience in Sierra Leone, is that the issue stems from the lack of, you know, formal financing to these miners. And what this means is they don't care about fair price for their product, right? They care about food. They care about clothes, schooling. That's their first need. Once that need is addressed, then we can talk about the other wonderful stuff that we as an industry can help deliver. It is challenging, as I said, but because it impacts so many millions of people in our industry, this is the opportunity for all of us to work together and find a scalable solution. And scalability will not work without the commercial viability.
And the other thing I wanted to just, if I may, with such admiration, Ferial, for Gem Fair. One of the other things is that the narrative that is told, we talk quite a lot about Fairmine Gold, about the miner stories, etc. Similarly, that focus is expanding with regard to colored stones. And I think we need to widen our embrace and speak more about artisanal diamond miners, the process, the material itself, and be part of stimulating a desire to know. So I just thought I would chime in there because I think that there is so much to be done within this space, and we are so committed to engaging in that process.
Thanks, Lisa. You know, I completely agree. There's a lot of information out there on gold and gems and diamonds. When we started looking into it, it was quite difficult to get the, the information. And I think the reason is because in volume, it's about, they say it's around 15% of world production, and value 5% of world production. And I know that's very different for colored stones. It's much larger. It didn't seem like such a huge problem to address immediately. But the truth is that the artisanal mining sector is synonymous with the issue of conflict diamonds in the minds of those that are not engaged, that don't understand the issue. It is not equal to conflict diamonds. It is a livelihood story, okay? And if done properly, it is the best story that you can do. So turning your back on that type of product is the most irresponsible thing to do. Sorry if I'm,
No,
I have to be direct on this front.
Totally agreed. And it's really important for us all to work to, each substance is different, each material has its own properties, and at the same time, there is a commonality of purpose to all of these endeavors. And I think, if you will, pivoting the perspective with regard to diamonds, if in fact the stereotype is still there, but pivoting that perspective is critically important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for the panelists, I'm shifting the order up a little bit because we haven't yet had a chance to hear from Virginie. And I think as we pair up the two, the scale concept, the scaling concept, it's an important opportunity for Virginie to speak as, part of Volcambi, a large refinery that has made a commitment to purchasing gold from artisanal and small scale communities. So Virginie, we had talked about, some of the tools or accords that would help advance your work, your vision in sourcing from ASM. And there are those that need the greatest amount of support that can't slide into a Fairmined or a fair trade certification, for example. So can you explain to us a little bit about what it would take from the vantage point where you sit?
Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you so much, Lisa, for inviting Volcambi to this great panel with very many familiar faces I work with very often. So it's a delight to be here. Well, you touched on, the most marginalized artisanal miners. At Volcambi, we reach already some of the most marginalized miners. In 2019, together with the Swiss Better Gold Association and Chopard, we developed a value chain with ancestral artisanal miners called the Barriqueros, from one of the poorest regions in Colombia. We're talking here about really our ancestral artisanal miners, we call them the panners as well. And we supported this the barriqueros to improve their practices. And now Valcambi refines the gold mined by more than 1,000 barriqueros. And Chopard use the refined gold into their the manufacturing of their pieces. So we do reach already, we have managed to put a value chain that reaches the most marginalized. And since 2015, when Valcambi started getting involved into ASM, we've made very good progress. We now source from mines in Peru, 3 mines in Peru, 4 in Colombia, plus this 1,000 barriqueros. And despite the fact we have made good progress, we know that there's so much more that needs to be done, and we've talked about it, of course. And for us, the tools that would help us to further engage with ASMs, and in particular with the most marginalized, can be categorized into 3 groups, if you want, areas. The first one is a very obvious one, and I'm not going to go much into details into that, is the need for appropriate country regulatory framework for formalization and traceability. And we work with governments, we partner, it's all about partnerships. We work with governments to develop that piece. The second aspect is further recognition of ASM and their goals into more value chains. And we've all talked about it. And that's what I want to focus on. But there's also a third part, which is about building volumes through responsible entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs and aggregators. So let me focus on the second one. So the need for this community of us supporting ASMs to grow. We need to be far more, many more, to be engaged, to source, to support the various initiatives. And it's fair to say that it's complex. Ferial, you talked about it, we all talked about it. It's extremely complex to get involved into ASMs. It requires a lot of work, a lot of skills, in particular to manage the risks. And this is what also is a barrier for many companies. But my message to the participants to this webinar is that despite the complexity, I want to encourage you to be involved. And there are many ways you can get involved. And this is about choice. You can get involved at different levels according to your resources and your appetite. And your appetite may grow along the way as you discover more about what is ASM. So the first way you can get involved is by simply sourcing fair trade, certified gold, fair trade, fair mine, better gold available, and even small volumes contribute to supporting these miners. The second way that requires a little bit more involvement is through partnerships with people on the ground, organizations on the ground, like the Alliance for Responsible Mining, like Fair Trade, and you work together like we do at Valcambi. You go on the ground to visit a number of mines that have already been selected by these organizations and which are supported by these organizations. We go, Valcambi, the way we do it, we always go with a potential buyer. So for example, with Chopard, we've been, just before COVID started, we went on the ground to visit a number of mines. Together, we selected the mines that were good candidates to include in our value chains. We supported them to improve their practices. We are still in the process, in fact. And once they reach the standards acceptable for Valcambi or the buyer, Chopard or any other buyer, we source from them. So we create the value chain up front. And it's a true partnership. And it's really fascinating to do that because you do it with the miners, you go and meet them, you do site visits. And the third way that is accessible for those who could consider ASM is to join some partnerships and associations. associations such as the Swiss Better Gold Association, the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals. I'm just naming two of them, whose missions are to support ASMs and increase the volumes of responsible minerals coming into global markets. And it's a really good way to start engaging, to start understanding what ASM is all about, be part of this group. And as you discover it, and through these initiatives and these associations, you can also visit the mining sites. And I would really encourage everybody listening to this webinar to actually go on the ground if you can, because it's only by seeing for yourself what it's like to be an artisanal miner that you will truly understand the challenges they're facing, but also the amazing work they're doing and their willingness to do better. So my message to all of you is, yes, I am not going to lie to you. It's fair, it's complex, it's demanding, but it's hugely rewarding, and there's no going back. Once you get into that, there's no going back. Now, touching really quickly, because the time is ticking, on the scalability. One of the barriers for Valcambi to source from more mines is the small volumes many mines produce. So what we are looking to do is to support the development of local entrepreneurs to become aggregators, so that we can combine the supply, still having full traceability. I'm reassuring everybody, but to combine the supply from many mines, small, bigger, so that we can source from these many other mines. And these local entrepreneurs would also conduct the right level of due diligence and provide the trainings to the miners, but also facilitate access to finance and equipment for the miners to increase their productivity and volumes. So these are some ideas that, I would hope we can progress to build up and to encourage more companies to get involved. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Virginie. It's it's a lot, and it really does take efforts at all the various levels, large and small. I am going to go back to Monica because she was cut off before her time. So bringing you back in, let's see how it's going. We'd love to hear from you. And, one of the last things you said that was very interesting was about the bank accounts. And then also this idea that why would it be better to buy from these people that are saying they want responsible stones versus those that were regular participants in the marketplace. So that's your prompt if you want to pick up where you left off.
Thanks, Christina. I hope my system is a bit better. Can you hear me? No?
We can hear you, but it's quiet.
Right.
Go ahead.
Better?
Oh.
We say you. It's good.
Slightly, yeah? Okay. All right. Yeah, so Christine, I think that's what I was trying to explain, that we were looking to bring the issue of responsible sourcing to host countries, and particularly to Africa, so that the artisanal miners could understand what is this new way of doing business, what is this new way that designers wanted to source for gemstones, and what is the importance of having the stories of the artisan miners carried through to the buyers, right? And that's what we've endeavored to do with the various programs and projects that we are working on in Africa. It's just really to create linkages and promote partnerships and collaborations by people who want to engage with artisan miners, people who want to work with the artisan miners, to give them a way and a vehicle through which to be able to do this in a manner where we can then, assure and bring a bit of transparency to the sourcing process. And that's what we've endeavored to do. Of course, most of you know of the Moyo Gems, and recently we collaborated with some of the jewelers, Susan and Jessica, to launch the Virtue Gem initiative out in Malawi and Zambia, with the same really notion of how do we get the responsible jewelers and the community of responsible gem dealers to get closer to the artisan miners and source from them and carry these stories. And how then do we also communicate to the miners the benefit of doing business with this responsible community? How do they understand the importance of some of the standards that are being, crafted? A case in point, the craft standards by ARM. When you cascade them and you want the miners to be able to implement these standards, what is the advantage to the miner? How does the miner understand this standard, considering who an artisan miner is and the level at which this artisan miner operates, and the obvious scenario where, as it has been explained, this is somebody who is not is an entrepreneur of necessity and not an entrepreneur of opportunity. They're just looking to feed themselves. So when you're telling them to implement a standard so that you can be able to work with them or source from them, what is their benefit in implementing that standard? And how do they understand that standard? And how do they interact with that standard? And given their level of literacy as well, how are they able to also, internalize that standard so that they can see it's to their advantage, to be able to enact? So it's more making this issue of responsible sourcing more of a collaborative effort, where it's not just the market dictating the rules and the rules of the game, but also making the miner come to the table as a partner to understand this way of doing business, to understand why it's important for you, as you say, you want to carry their story, that you want business to be done in this way. And that's what some of these initiatives like Virtue Gem are seeking to do. And also understanding the environment where they work. We just say Africa, but Africa is 52 different countries. So what I do in Kenya, what I do in Tanzania, I have to also be careful of what I'm going to do in Malawi and in Zambia, because we all have different laws and regulations for these different countries. How are different programs going to be enacted in the different jurisdictions? What are their laws and regulations? How is their society organized and arranged? When we started Virtue Gem, we really wanted to work with women miners because we were women ourselves organizing the program. Our aim was really to create more inclusivity, bring more women into this sourcing conversation, and have more of them sell their gemstones. But when we went to the ground, the reality is very different. And the environment is such that this is a very heavily male-dominated space. The artisanal miners, the dealers of gemstones are mainly men. And we realized we cannot run these programs without bringing the men on board. Case in point, in Malawi, the Association of Women in Malawi is coordinated by a man, right? So contextualizing the different countries that we are, running these programs. Understanding, and I think Ude said this about the geopolitics. What are the geopolitics of some of the jurisdictions we were going to run these programs? There's also a new awakening that has come, especially in Africa. I don't know if most of you are familiar with a policy document called the Africa Mining Vision. The Africa Mining Vision was enacted through the African Union signed in by all African countries. And it speaks about not just sourcing of minerals from Africa, but how do we add value of minerals sourced from Africa? Because they realized just buying rough stones and buying rough gold from Africa and rough minerals, a lot of the benefit was not accruing to the host communities. We still have a huge issue of unemployment in Africa. We have a huge youthful population looking for jobs. And the conversation through the Africa Mining Vision is now moving to how do we get a lot of the value addition of these minerals to be done in host countries, so that if it's a gemstone somebody wants to buy, how can it be cut in Africa? Hence giving more jobs to the youth in Africa, giving more opportunities to the women who do not have the capacity in terms of financing and even the physical ability to always be out in the mines digging, in the pits. You know, what are other opportunities up in the value chain that can be created? And this is what the Africa Mining Vision speaks to. And that's what we are also trying to translate through the Virtue Gem initiative, where when we went to Zambia, we found a country where the policy framework and the awakening of the people was, we want to be able to cut our gemstones. We don't want to just sell them rough, because we want more opportunities to also accrue to the ground. And that's why for Virtue Gem, we said to the various responsible jewelers, could you allow for the youth and the women in Zambia to cut for you the stone you want to use in your jewelry? Could you give a chance to an African young cutter to showcase their skills and ability, so that when you're carrying that story as a responsible jeweler, you're not just carrying the story of the source country of where that gemstone has come from, but you're also carrying the story of who cut that stone, what other extra value came to the ground through working in collaborations and partnership in some of these projects. It's not easy. We are testing a narrative, but I'd like to really thank the jewelers who've given a chance to have some of their stones cut in Africa, because then it carries a very rich narrative. And this becomes the space and opportunity for greater partnerships and collaborations with more jewelers, with more interested partners, to be able to ask, how else do we benefit host countries? How else do we define responsible sourcing if more can be done other than just buying rough minerals or rough gemstones from host countries?
Thank you so much. As always happens with these, it is high time we move to audience questions. So I know some of our panelists have prepared other remarks, and you might have some opportunities to answer that through the Q&A, but we do have some questions coming in, and I am going to hand that over to Lisa, who's going to help facilitate audience questions.
Yes.
Thank you all.
And I'd like to say that we commit to chapter 2 of this conversation. So please know that anything that has not been said, we will walk together and we will write this book together. The first question is rather open, but I'm going to direct it to Uta. What are some of the first steps that small jewelry brands can take to ethically source materials?
There are many steps, and when we started about 10 years ago, it was absolutely difficult and impossible. But as I said earlier, in terms of metal, very easy. You can source fair trade, you can source fair mined, you can go to their websites. Even as a small jeweler, you don't have to use huge quantities. You can buy grams at the time. They have 2 different license models, one for jewelers who take a bit more and some others who take less. In terms of, Connie earlier mentioned, and I think everybody mentioned, increased cost, absolutely. But you need to see that quite relative as a jeweler. So if I take fair trade gold, say the typical wedding band, say is about 8 grams maybe. So my additional cost, if I made a wedding band like that, is conservatively would be, say, maybe £20, which is what, $25 or something. So really, how many lattes is that? You know, in the perspective, it is indeed more expensive, but if you put it relative, it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And you can start small. You know, none of us are perfect yet. As we heard, there's so many challenges still. We're working on it. As Christina said, we're at the beginning with some things, but you know, don't let the idea of the perfect get into the way of the incremental change. I have for years and years put every little piece of information I found on my little website to share it. And one piece of information, and somehow it ended up being the largest resource on ethical jewelry practices in the world. So it's one tiny little step after the other, even unintentional, gets us somewhere. It's just persistent. Now, in 2018, the incorporation of Goldsmiths in Scotland, I handed them over all my research of 9 years. They are now looking after that resource, expanding it, and it's called ethicalsourcing.org. So all jewelers who want to start somewhere, whether it's kind of green bench practices, whether it's where to source, how to source, also stone sources, gemstones, ethicalmaking.org. So all I say, persistence. And also there are things you can start, you know, you think, oh my God, my whole sourcing, that'll take years until there's things on that website you can do in 2 hours that make a huge difference. There are things like you can do in 2 days, and then you've already made a huge difference. And then you can tackle the things that are a bit more challenging. And some people have worked on things for 10 years. So, yeah.
So I'm going to step in, if I may, just to ensure that we keep the questions rolling. And the next question is quite related, and in certain respects, and it's for Ferial. Would these Gem Fair artisans, would these Gem Fair artisanal, ethically sourced diamonds be available in another distribution system or only through the site holder system? And this is actually a question that's been posed to me. So I'm delighted that it came in for you.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that's a really great question. So, as I mentioned previously, we've been doing things in a phased way so that we can, you know, learn, pivot, be agile, address all of these different issues before we, you know, go to market. This is the year that we've been focusing on all of the research on how to best go to market in order to make this business model sustainable. We've tried to develop something where you do good by doing well, and you can only do that if you have like-minded people across the value chain that are willing to A, engage, and B, be part of the solution by investing. So, you know, just requiring ethical, you know, product doesn't, in my mind, mean that you're a responsible trader, right? You need to do a little bit more. And the further you are from the source, the less you are able to do, right? And I completely accept that. However, there is more that you can do. The research that we've conducted basically shows us that no one's willing to pay a premium, that all this great work that we've done, they want the story, they want to buy the goods. Where can I buy them? Where can I buy them? But then they want a market value. So they feel that, you know, the liquidity of my product, which really doesn't really matter to me because it's a small volume, right? If we were talking huge volumes, then liquidity would matter. There is no economies of scale here. The liquidity of my product is not my driver. The fact that I have demand for my product is not my driver. I'm looking for ethically sound-minded companies across the value chain to help take this product to market. And that could be via site holder, or it could not be. but you know, the chains of communications are open. You know where to find us. Feel free to contact GemFair and you know, give us your proposals. Help us.
I think that's a wonderful invitation, because I know that there are many who are interested actually in sourcing GemFair stones. So that's a fabulous invitation, and everybody please reach out to Feriel and her team. The third question that I have here is for Valcambi. So Virginie, do the Swiss gold refiners disclose what % of gold they refine from which country of origin? This is a known issue in the gold industry, where illegal ASM mined gold enters the value chain as, quote, recycled gold, end quote, and issues of laundered gold in UAE as an example. What does Valcambi do to ensure that none of this falsely labeled recycled gold enters its supply chain? And what does the wider gold industry need to do to be able to tackle this issue? And it seems to me that's two questions. So I would focus first on what relates to Valcambi.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say that in this question is another fantastic conversation such as this.
So in relation to the countries we source from, we report through our audit, LBMA audits, the countries we source from, and the aggregates, of course, is they can't put the names behind each country, but they aggregates the numbers, and it is available. Now, coming back to the second part of the question, regarding what we do to ensure that no conflict gold gets into our value chain disguised as recycled. Well, we conduct a thorough due diligence on all our counterparties. And for mine products, we source only directly from the mines. The only exception is the barriqueros. We actually source from an aggregator in Colombia. So because they produce really tiny volumes, like 1 gram, if they're lucky, per day. But for mine products, we directly source from the mines to avoid any intermediaries, to better manage our risks. And we conduct a thorough due diligence, in particular, enhanced due diligence when it comes to artisanal and small-scale mines. But it's not only about due diligence for mined sourcing, it's also about, as I explained, developing a relationship with the miners, going on the ground to meet them, verifying with them their practices, and accompanying them in improving their practices. Now, when it comes to recycled gold, we do source from many clients recycled gold, and we also conduct enhanced due diligence depending on their locations. But also, we are very clear about which origin we do not accept materials from, and which origins we do accept materials from. So typically, if we buy materials, recycled materials, we do not accept Africa origin or any countries where there's a high risk. And because we source directly from, if we are to source from Africa, it's directly from the mines. So this is our supply policy, which all our clients know very well about. It's available on our website. So it's about due diligence, scrutinizing the practices of our suppliers and their suppliers. We go beyond the first intermediaries, in particular for recycle, since mines anyway we source directly, but we go beyond the first intermediary. So we have access. We ask for to see the audits of their own suppliers beyond the intermediary, the first intermediary.
Okay, so I'm going to step in here and say that the remainder of that question relates to something we talk about quite a lot, Christina and I, which is, where does your gold come from? And so we invite you all on that journey. Having said that, we've come to the end of our allotted time. I encourage everybody to submit questions offline. They will be answered. If you have an intended recipient for your question, we will make sure that that question is received by the individual. And we look forward to welcoming you to another such conversation. And we hope that this has taken us all one step further, or as someone we all know and admire says, making us ever better in the journey that we are undertaking. So thank you, everybody, from the bottom of my heart for joining us. And thank you all for spending this time on this conversation. We will be taking a 10-minute break, and then we will have our second panel. So with warmest thoughts to you all, we hope to see you, but if your schedules preclude, understood. Take care. Bye-bye. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're joining us just now, we're thrilled you're here. If you were on for this first panel, delighted that you have stayed with us. This is a particularly wonderful moment. This panel, which is titled Leadership in Responsible Practice, Celebrating 20 Years of Sustained Commitment, is the prelude to the presentation of IAC's award for Leadership in Responsible Practice in Jewelry to Tiffany & Company's Anissa Costa. We are joined today for this panel. It's really such a moment. Mark Hanna, Chief Marketing Officer of Richline, and an utter inspiration to so many of us. Steve Desposito, CEO and President of Resolve. Mike Kowalski, retired Chairman of the Board and CEO of Tiffany & Company. Anissa herself, Chief Sustainability Officer and head for Tiffany & Company and head of the Tiffany & Company Foundation. And then Christina Miller, who is such an astonishing presence. So we're gathered here for this conversation, and I'm turning over to Christina. And thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it is my great pleasure to facilitate, feels like too stark a word to describe this conversation. But this is wonderful. And we're going to hop right in it because this is a major celebration, the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Tiffany Foundation. And so we're going to lead right in with you, Mike. And this year, it's a big celebration of Tiffany & Company's 20th anniversary for the foundation. So you can all do the math. That was the year 2000, when everyone was scared that the whole world was going to crumble. But your history goes back further than that, with beginning to take a step of leadership in the space around mining topics. So can you tell us a little bit more about what happened in 1995 and your effort to protect Yellowstone National Park?
Sure. Like so many important events, there was a bit of serendipity involved. I had just returned with my family from our annual National Park Western road trip, which we had done for many years, and we had visited Yellowstone National Park. Returning, I came across an article in an environmental magazine talking about the threat to Yellowstone National Park, specifically the New World Mine, which was a gold mine to be built nearly adjacent to the park. At about the same time, we received a number of letters, not many, but just enough to get our attention, customers saying what a tragedy Yellowstone National Park was being put at risk for the jewelry industry by extension. We were shocked. We sat down with a bunch of our senior officers, and we said we needed to do something. And what we did was relatively low key. We simply wrote a strongly worded letter to the chairman and CEO of the mining company at that time. And actually, I found the letter earlier, and I just wanted to read part of it because it sort of is relevant today. And we simply said, we believe that the extraction of precious metals and gemstones, the core material for so many of our products, must be conducted in a way that does not damage the environment. Most simply, the beauty we seek to bring to our customers through our jewelry cannot be at the expense of the natural world, which is so often its inspiration. That trade-off is unacceptable to us, and most importantly, is unacceptable to our customers. We sent the letter off, not really expecting much, and a couple of days later, got a frantic phone call from the leadership of the mining company, asking could they please visit us with us in New York. They wanted to talk to us. We set the date. They asked if they might come in early, and proceeded to build a scale model of the New World Mine in our boardroom in an effort to convince us that no harm could be done. Obviously, we didn't agree. We subsequently reached out to Bruce Babbitt, the Secretary of the Interior, and our takeaway from that was, and interestingly, we didn't go public beyond that, but our big takeaway, and it was, I think, really the beginning of our sustainability efforts, recognizing the power of the Tiffany brand when we speak out about anything to do with mining or sustainability. We quite frankly stumbled onto a bully pulpit, and I guess to one degree or another have been using it ever since.
Thanks for sharing a bit about that story. There are a number of key events that tie together, as part of this conversation today. And Lisa was sharing with me that in 2011, it was the first gold conference where the film River of Gold was screened. And for those of you watching, you can look it up. But that film does a really excellent job discussing the impacts of large-scale mining in pristine areas on the environment, and we're still dealing with these issues today. We've had this opportunity to be aware. We're still dealing with them. So why did Tiffany & Company see the proposed Pebble Mine in Alaska and its headwaters on the Bristol Bay as something it needed to stand against as a company? Not many companies are willing to make such a bold commitment and then stick with it. So why are you continuing to fight it today?
Yeah, you're right, Christina. I mean, these days, companies speaking out and taking a stance on issues is quite frankly commonplace, right? But this wasn't always the case. And something that I'm very proud of is that Tiffany & Company, since 1995, as Mike mentioned, has consistently spoken out about key issues in a thoughtful manner. And one of these issues for us is the proposed Pebble Mine in Bristol Bay, Alaska. For Tiffany & Company, this is simply the wrong mine in the wrong place. Bristol Bay is home to the world's most productive salmon fishery, and the proposed Pebble Mine really threatens to disrupt the ecosystem and the livelihoods, and frankly, just the way of life for local and indigenous communities. And it's this local perspective that was and continues to be critical to, and just at the very heart of Tiffany's position on this mine. We are so proud that we are part of a coalition of very diverse voices that range from Alaska Natives, recreational and commercial fishermen, restaurateurs, conservationists, right, hunters and anglers, and of course, other jewelers that have all come together to raise a really unified voice in opposition to the proposed mine. And this is an issue for the jewelry industry. And frankly, it's an issue for business more broadly, because when consumers view mining as irresponsible and harmful, it hurts all industries that used mined materials. Back in 2008, Tiffany was one of the first jewelers to sign the Bristol Bay Protection Pledge and declare that should the Pebble mine be developed, we would not source gold from it. And we stand by that pledge today, alongside so many of our colleagues in the jewelry industry that are probably part of this symposium right now, and who've signed the pledge. But I would just make an ask, and that is that for those who have not yet done so, for those who have not yet signed the Bristol Bay Protection Pledge, I would just encourage you to research the issue, to listen to local communities and the science, and to lend your voice to this by signing the pledge. Because in Bristol Bay, we really potentially just risk too much in altering what's such a treasured landscape that generations of communities have thrived in for what would be just simply short-term financial gain.
Thank you. It's a strong statement of leadership. And so to put Mark-Hannah on the spot a little bit here, like this is a big deal. So how do you think an issue like, you know, the Pebble Mine story and then Tiffany and Company's vocal position, what ripple effect has that had on the jewelry industry, you know, as a leader yourself?
I think, first of all, Anissa's plea for others to join is incredibly important and impactful. And I think that's something I hopefully everyone will hear, and everyone that's participating in this will take some action on. But yeah, I think unfortunately enough, there's not enough of the strong, good publicity for what people like Tiffany are doing. And we get a lot of negative publicity in the industry, and some of it's well-deserved, but there are so many great organizations and people like Mike and Anissa fighting to do this the right way. So Tiffany's emphasis on origin, really the initial source of metals like gold, highlights for us and for the industry, really that the primary foundation of our products has to be ethical. It has to be a contributive source to humanity. You know, we're creating beautiful things and we need to create them in a beautiful way. And I think that it's important to each person and each company within the industry to follow Tiffany's lead. You know, and the statement Mike read all the way back from the beginning of this was 100% right. That, you know, for us to be the beautifully strong, emotionally connected industry that we want to be, you know, we've got to pay attention to all parts of our industry. And Tiffany's clearly the leader and clearly the peer influence. And I congratulate them for this.
Peer pressure takes on a different meaning in this sense, doesn't it? Well, so establishing that mining can be done responsibly, Anissa, was sort of your challenge a little bit there, that there's this consumer, there could be, there's concern if consumers understand mining to be only detrimental. And so I'd like to turn to Steve. You know, one of the projects that you helped to develop is called Salmon Gold. And it has a unique story. And in some ways it demonstrates how mining can be done responsibly in Alaska. There are companies that are joining you, organizations that are joining you in this partnership. Can you tell us a little bit more about the vision and what's actually happening there?
Sure. Thanks, Christina. And it's nice to be back with all of you. Christina and Lisa, you know, I've always enjoyed meeting these sessions in person in New York, and I miss that and look forward to it again. And the reason we're really all on this call today, as I see it, is because we were talking here about a company that's a leading company, exhibits leadership, but it's also, I think, important to note that it's proactive and risk-willing leadership. You know, my introduction to Tiffany was atypical because when I was running Earthworks as an advocacy, you know, as an advocate pushing for change, we often ring up the companies or, you know, hold up a banner and say, hey, what about this? The story of our relationship is that Mike Kowalski and Anissa reached out to us, like they made the first phone call before the protest sign went up or the banner went up. And I think that tells you what you need to know. And it also draws back to Mike's example of that, first letter, or first ask, if you will. Salmon Gold, it's really a story of, I flew over the Yukon River and saw that from placer mining from, in some cases, over 100 years ago, the tailings from that placer mining had been left in the river. And when it dawned on me that those same rivers and streams were once good habitat for salmon and grayling, a light bulb went off. There's got to be a way, if there's any gold left in those tailings, because it was inefficiently mined back then, to pull that last gold out and maybe complete the circle. And we've been talking a lot in the first session that I listened in on, and starting to talk now about how we're trying to keep the bad out of our supply chains to de-risk our supply chains. Well, this is a story about putting the good into supply chains, right? That's what Salmon Gold does, because when I realized that habitat could be restored and there was some remaining gold, it was pretty clear who the first phone call was going to, a risk-willing, proactive, leading company who was willing to take a bet that we would fail, because there was no guarantee we were going to be able to. And to get to your point, Christina, Salmon Gold, Resolve is, the creator, if you will, but it's only happening because we have Tiffany and we have Apple and we have First Nations and Alaska Native corporations, and we have placer miners who help us get the gold out, right? And then they help us restore the stream. So it's really, that's what Salmon Gold is. It's a partnership, and it's about, we took over 100 years. And some of it was unintentional. We're talking about mining from the Klondike gold rush in some cases. So it's not placing blame, but it's accepting the responsibility that the jewelry sector, the mining sector, we all have an obligation to go back in and do what we can. And so this is an opportunity to do what we can, starting small, remining, getting the last gold out. Sometimes nuggets like this size come out, not too often. That's a Salmon Gold nugget there. But we've got support from former mining CEOs and VPs, from jewelry industry, from government. So it's a good story. It's a passion project, and it's about being able to do something first on a small scale. But the real goal, took decades, 100+ years to impact those streams. Let's take the time needed, years, decades, put it back in shape so the legacy is really good. That's what Salmon Gold is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm going to ask Anissa if you want to expand on that at all. We can totally talk about this a little bit more. Kind of placer mining and small scale operations is what Salmon Gold is addressing, and those tailings are an issue. But we also know, there are abandoned mines across the American West. And yeah, can you speak a bit to what Tiffany and Company Foundation is doing to address these? Like, why is this such a problem? Why are there so many abandoned mines?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I might just say to Steve's point, though, that we're so proud that the first responsibly mined Salmon Gold is in Tiffany's supply chain. And we're just really excited to continue working with Resolve and Steve and Apple on Salmon Gold as a program expands, because I think it is about, our commitment to protecting special places that's driving our investment in responsible mining. And our purchase in Salmon Gold really just proves how producing gold can support restoration and conservation, as you said. But Christina, to your question about abandoned mines, I think, first of all, many people simply just don't realize that there are over 500,000 abandoned mines scattered across the American West from over a century ago, dating back to the gold rush days. And it's because of this that for the last 15 years, the Tiffany and Company Foundation has supported organizations that are working to remediate abandoned mine sites, to clean up polluted landscapes and waterways so that these habitats can be safe for fish and wildlife, and of course, therefore, for people and for communities. So the Tiffany Foundation has supported organizations such as Trout Unlimited and Clark Fort Coalition, who have really been working tirelessly to reclaim abandoned mine sites and empower local communities so that they can protect their lands and restore watersheds for recreation and tourism and just for general enjoyment for the, the way it should be. So while we've focused a lot, obviously, on the United States, we've also supported reclamation work in Africa as well, and now in Latin America with Pure Earth's reclamation efforts in the Peruvian Amazon. And I think, I should probably mention one other thing, and that is that in looking at this issue, we're not only supporting cleanup efforts from these historic sites, but it's also important to address the future. And so something else that we have been quite active in is reform of the antiquated mining laws in the United States, which date back, believe it or not, to 1872. And we think that this is something that is critical because it's really important to better protect landscapes and communities for the future.
Thank you for adding that. And to Mike, this is interesting. So a company needs a mechanism, to address these kinds of things. When you make it part of your mission, you need a mechanism to address it properly. So the foundation was established in 2000. Tell us a little bit about that. Why a foundation structure, and what were the initial goals?
Sure. I guess the short answer is that we simply wanted our charitable contributions to be genuinely philanthropic, not driven by marketing considerations. And at the time, quite frankly, they were. And it didn't quite sit right with us. So we thought that the best way to do that was, in a sense, back ourselves into a corner and create a distinct foundation legal entity, which by law had to be purely philanthropic. So that was step one. I guess more fundamentally, I think the foundation really sprang, very naturally from the Tiffany culture and a belief that while we, of course, we had an IPO not that long ago, so we certainly realized that maximizing shareholder wealth was important, but for us, it was only part of the equation. We felt strongly about serving communities, and way back then, again, 20 years ago, we actually thought that we owed a responsibility to the home planet. So that was sort of the genesis, the philosophical genesis. In some ways, that was the easy part. The more challenging part was understanding how to give away reasonable sums of money effectively and responsibly, rather than simply doing what caught our fancy at the time. That, of course, was always a danger. So that ultimately led us to recruit someone with great philanthropic experience, who also could lead Tiffany's sustainability efforts. And obviously, the rest is history. That's when Anissa joined the company.
And welcome again, Anissa. That was a lovely segue. No blushing. So, another thing that Tiffany & Company has been committed to for so long is a program now called the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, which recently had its first test run of the audit at a silver mine in Mexico. And you've been there since the very beginning with IRMA. So what was the need for change that you perceived as a company, and how did it evolve to where it is today?
Yeah, well, Christina, through the conversation so far, I think you've probably been able to get an understanding that, for Tiffany & Company, we know and we understand the importance of collaboration and of standard setting. It's why over the last 2 decades, we were a founding member of the RJC, why we helped to establish the Diamond Development Initiative, why we were active in the Madison Dialogue way back in the day, and No Dirty Gold, among other things. And for those that don't know, IRMA is a mine site certification, right? It has a very comprehensive standard that looks across all mined materials, and it's applicable globally. IRMA is one of the key initiatives that we've been involved with from the beginning and continue to see significant value in today. And I think one of the most critical elements for Tiffany is IRMA's multi-stakeholder governance model. The standard was developed by downstream and mining companies, by local impacted communities, labor unions, nonprofit organizations with a focus on the environment and on human rights. And all of these sectors have an equal say in IRMA's governance. So this isn't just about consultation, but for IRMA, it has been about co-creation. And just this month, as you mentioned, IRMA announced that the first mine site has been audited against its mining standard. And this is a really significant milestone because it really drives forward responsible practices and transparency in the mining sector. And at Tiffany & Company, we're just really, really pleased to see that other purchasers and mining companies increasingly are getting engaged. And we're excited about where IRMA is going. But I want to, if you don't mind, Christina, I really want to pull in Mike and Steve into this conversation because they too were a part of the early conversations when we realized that there was a need for this standard. So I want to pull Mike and Steve in if I can.
Yeah.
Steve actually already made a reference that first phone call post the New World Mine adventure. We not suddenly, but we realized that we simply had no way of, we realized that we were vulnerable to the extent that we had little or no control, certainly, and little or no understanding about what represented responsible mining. And so as part of that first phone call to Steve was, Steve, help us out. We want to do the right thing, but we're relatively clueless. We're jewelers, we're not miners. And, tell us what a responsible mine looks like. And there was a bit of silence on the other end of the phone. And that led to well, Steve, let me give it to you here.
Right. Yeah, it took a while, even in the beginning, just to get started, because it was interesting, right? Because we were being challenged as NGOs to say, not just what we didn't want, but what we wanted, right? And so we spent just in the NGO community like a year and a half working through that. So we could actually, we took the challenge, seriously, like, let's go engage with the mining sector and sort this out. So to do that, you have to know what you want, right? So that's what we did. That's what Earthworks did. But what I really want to kind of highlight is that it was different back then, right? So it was seen as a challenge to the mining industry, and it created conflict and it created opposition. I'll never forget the series of peacekeeping dinners we had with mining CEOs and VPs after Tiffany ran its I think open letter in the Washington Post, simply calling for responsible sourcing, not saying a whole lot more. Just the fact that they did that created some tension. And I think it was healthy tension, right? So we worked through that, but I think it's really important to kind of take stock of where we are. It's really significant that we move way past that. It's not a question anymore of whether, it's just a simple question of how best, right? I see the movement toward responsible sourcing and I've been kind of somewhat critical of the proliferation of standards, but actually it's really now a competition for who's going to succeed, right? And that's a really good place to be in. I just wanted to add one element to that. Anissa pointed to the first certification. I saw an email come across my desk this morning, which I reached out to IRMA to congratulate them, because I think it's actually in some ways more significant, because Albemarle, a lithium producer, just signed up to do an IRMA audit, right? And so that means that IRMA is out front in the move toward, we're talking here about jewelry, but in my analysis, the driver to responsible sourcing is going to be the energy transition, all the cobalt, the copper, lithium. That's what's going to drive the change. And so if we get that right, we're in a really good place, and IRMA is now well positioned to do that. So I was pretty pleased to see that email come across my desk this morning.
That's very exciting. Anissa, do you want to add anything else to that before we go on?
No, I think that Mike and Steve said what needed to be said.
Yeah. Lisa?
I do want to add one thing, as having been like the others, one of the reviewers of the initial IRMA document, all 274 pages of guidelines, that I can say that was one of the most educational things I ever read to do with the industry and to do with responsible practices. That it does everything from water supply and water maintenance to reclamation and so forth. And I think anyone that really wants an education in what needs to be done should read that document.
I'd like to mention something which may seem a bit reductive, but just to make it clear, IRMA deals with large-scale mining. And so much of the conversation today, and I don't mean this day, I mean in our times, is about ASM, which, you know, that's incredibly important. But at the same time, there's a spectrum. And so I just wanted to situate what IRMA is doing, because responsible practice in LSM is just as much of an imperative. And I think IRMA does really lead the way. And I have great admiration for what you've accomplished, and for Aimé Boulanger.
Agreed. Lisa just mentioned ASM, or artisanal and small scale mining. For the jewelry industry, that's the precious metals, that's diamonds, that's gemstones. So for Steve, if you would continue a bit, there's been a lot of work done over the past decade or so on the artisanal mining sector. You know, both we're working top down, bottom up, trying to make things connect in the middle. And this includes efforts like the Diamond Development Initiative, the Alliance for Responsible Mining, programs that have received Tiffany & Company Foundation money, among others. What do you see as the future for this space? You know, how is this evolving, the way companies support on the ground initiatives, and how can we accelerate progress on this front?
Yeah. I think it happens in a couple of places. One is at the consumer side, the retail side, with expressions of intent and interest. And I mean public expressions, you know, on websites and things of that nature, saying, I want my jewelry to be responsibly sourced. I mean, I think you have to say it to follow through. And I would argue that, you know, jewelers from small to large, from, you know, retailers to craftspeople, as you're familiar with, Christina, with Ethical Metalsmiths, I mean, I remember when you guys started, right? So I think that's the driver, right? And so we need more, better. We need more voice. We need more kind of attention. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, I think, is that, you know, I think the fair trade, fair mine piece of the action is really important, but we need to get supply, and we need to have an entry path, right, for miners to get on the train, and so that may be imperfect, and it's, but you know, it's hard coming from civil society to say, well, we need to be okay with improvement, but I think that breakthrough has occurred, and I think you're seeing now in the ASM sector, you know, we heard about on the previous session. What De Beers, and thank them for sponsoring, by the way, what they're doing with GemFair, and DDI has been involved, and so I think that's real progress. I mean, you know, they're on the ground working at these challenging issues. It's hard, grinding work, but it's important to do to kind of show, you know, and then, you know, DDI, which is now part of Resolve. I was involved with Tiffany Foundation and others in the Madison Dialogue, and you said, I don't think I would have remembered that if you hadn't mentioned that little trip down memory lane there, but you know, that was kind of us coming together, key actors in industry and NGOs saying we need to do more in the ASM space, and you know, the DDI emerged from that, as did other things, and so like for DDI, for Diamond Development Initiative, a couple of things are going to be important to us. One is really getting the shape of this. You know, what are the standards that matter, and how do they link together? So a jeweler can understand that complex space and try to navigate it. And the other thing I think that's important is we need to go back to those communities who were impacted negatively by diamond mining and do more reclamation, restoration, and reconciliation. One of the little gems in the DDI program that I'm really excited about is what Anglo American's supporting in Sierra Leone. And Tiffany did it years ago too. Projects with Jeffrey Wright, that is, let's go back and take those festering wounds on the earth, right? Those diamond pits, and let's clean them up and turn them into arable land and do some good. And we're going to launch an initiative. GDI is going to take that, what we did in Sierra Leone, and with all of you, hopefully, and you're all going to be invited to the party, we're going to try to really put some effort into reconciliation and restoration in communities on the land.
Sign me up. Reconciliation is one of the things that's been top of mind as of late. It's a very important part of all of our work because of how the Western jewelry industry was created and is able to go. Like, it's such an important thing. I'm really glad to hear that. So that's a really good segue to this idea that you know, corporations require public trust. They require purchasing of product from consumers that believe that what they're doing is good. And from my perception, sometimes that corporate trust is waning a bit, and so their activities are, you know, need to be looked at there. So I'm curious, Mark, from your perspective, what do Richline and Tiffany and Company continue to do to maintain the public trust?
Thank you, Christina. I think to be trusted, you have to pay attention. This is whether you're large or small. You have to pay attention to what I call your trustability index, which means that you've got to look at this in a very broad way. You have to look at your return on responsible practices. That's important if you're going to continue to do them and invest in them and make them broader. You've got to look at your reputation and the return on your reputation that responsible practices give you. And that's just not dollars and cents, but that's people being 10 times more likely to work for you and continue to work for you than others if you do it. So, and I think that, you know, we've all, you know, I think from small to large, we've been given new goals. We've been given new tools. The SDGs and the ESGs, you know, and UN Global Compact, you know, in those guidelines, we're getting a strong indication as to what we should be paying attention to. And then as we prioritize and as we make them material and relevant to our business or choose those that are most there, then we have to take action. And I think both Nisa and Stephen said earlier, and Mike did too, that it's about what you do. So it's about identifying, you know, for instance, we've got 4 key SDGs that we believe are priority for us. So then you've got to put a plan together and you've got to get a scorecard and you've got to know where you stand first and foremost. And you know, Steve knows a lot about this. Before we get something new started, we got to know where we are. So understanding the importance of those is important. But I think also, and especially coming out of pandemic, and somebody referred to the natural world earlier, that we've got a much more conscious consumer than we even had going in. And I think it's, when we talk about sustainability, we need to not talk about sustainability at our companies. We need to talk about sustainability of our companies, because we do the right things and we're doing it for the right people, and that the economics will come with the ethics. You know, being part of Berkshire, I've been learning all Warren's quotes, and you know, he said in reputation, you know, we can afford to lose money, a lot of money, but we can't afford to lose reputation, not even a small shred of our reputation. And right now, reputation depends on our purpose. Reputation depends on our impact. And all the things that are getting done, they're not enough. We need to do more. We need to pay attention to, at this particular point in time, all the human issues very much. So I think trust comes from what you do. And, you know, again, taking this back to Anissa and Mike and Tiffany, you know, their accomplishments are fantastic, and they're real, and they set an example for all of us.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to just go back to Salmon Gold for 1 minute, or not Salmon Gold, but Red Gold, the film, and just bring something out that's, I think Mark had touched on, that is really important. which is we talk about the environment and the land and land reclamation. But that is part and parcel of the totality. Humanity is part of that. And one of the things that comes across so vividly in Red Gold is the integrity of an indigenous culture. And often people will say, oh, I'm doing X or Y responsibly. But what they may have done in the process is obliterate that culture and then implement something that appears clean. And consideration of human patrimony and cultural presence and the symbiosis of culture and environment is absolutely critical. And that's something that you have stood for. And I really wanted to make that point because we do all of this, if you will, for the future of humanity, not solely the planet, but the totality and the interaction that makes up the universe, which is an interaction of people and land, and obviously many other multivalent factors. But that attention to cultural significance and integrity of culture and the right to culture, and that is part of IRMA as well. Yeah. And bringing that to the table proactively, as opposed to just retrospectively, sort of dealing with people who have been harmed. I think that is a big step forward in how to make things better, how to do things better.
Lisa, I'm hope you don't mind if I jump in. I'm so glad you said that. And Mark, I'm so glad you did as well, because we live in such an interconnected and interdependent world. There is no separate people silo and planet silo. And I often think of Tiffany & Company's sustainability pillars, which are planet, people, and product. And again, they just are all so interconnected, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of everything in a very comprehensive fashion, as you just spoke to. And really, again, co-creating things together with local and indigenous communities and listening to the voices of people and the science as well that we've learned a lot about over the years.
We will be opening up this this discussion to questions from the audience. So there are a few questions that are coming in, and before we segue to that, we wanted to bring the conversation up to the very present moment for Anissa and for Tiffany & Company. So can you tell us a bit about the new Diamond Traceability Initiative? It's just very recently been made public to consumers. So what role does this initiative play in securing the trust that Mark was talking about and Lisa was referring to?
Yes, and really happy to talk about the present and the future, but I just have to say I probably have had this permanent smile on my face this entire panel, and I did the previous panel as well, because I'm just so thankful, Christina, to you and to Lisa and to the entire team to have brought everyone together, and it just makes me smile, honestly, to be sitting here and listening to Mark and to Mike and to Steve and to you and Lisa. So with that, I will answer your question. For those that might not be aware, last year, Tiffany & Company launched the Diamond Source Initiative. And this is where we began sharing the provenance of our newly sourced individually registered diamonds. This month, what we've done is we've taken that effort a step further. And we're sharing now is the diamond craft journey with our customers. So that includes cutting and polishing and then grading and setting. And I would say that, this initiative is built off of our 20-year investment, which Mike and others really kicked off. And that is in the vertical integration of our supply chain. And this vertical integration in our supply chain really helps us uphold our standards of craftsmanship, of safe and healthy working environments, community economic development, and then of course, supply chain traceability. I'm often asked if we're doing this because our clients are asking for it. And actually, this isn't something that we decided to put forward because our clients were asking for it. It's something that we chose to do. It's information that we want to share proactively because we really want to help empower and encourage customers to make more informed, responsible purchasing decisions by bringing the stone specific information to the case line, to the website, to diamond certificates. And so what we're doing is really hoping to anticipate the needs of our customers, but also raising awareness, right, among those who might not otherwise have considered the importance of diamond traceability. And when choosing a diamond, that's not only knowing its country of origin, but it's the conditions and care in which it was crafted. And I think, Mark, you might have said this earlier, but when looking at the jewelry industry, all too often in the press, there's a focus on the negative. And I don't think that's fair, right? In the face of all these pressing issues that we have in society today, at Tiffany, we really believe that it's important to us, right, as a consumer of mined materials, to improve the situation. And we know that when done responsibly, diamond mining can and should be a positive source of economic power, a positive source of social impact. And we think that our Diamond Source Initiative and our Diamond Craft Journey helps tell that story.
Christina, I just want to add to something you said earlier, in addition to what Anise just said, that you talked about trust waning. Well, the answer to trust waning was trust and verify. And I think that, all of us on this panel, certainly most of you in the audience, have heard the phrase trust and verify now for probably close to a decade. And the ultimate verified is transparency. And whether you get there with some type of measurement or blockchain or however you get there, the idea that you're there, it's true, it's authentic, and you can talk about it and share it, that's the ultimate verify. And as more of that happens and more, it becomes more important to us across our industry and across our supply chains, that trust will come back. It'll come back and it'll be exceeded, but we have to do that. So that's kind of my soapbox. And
I'll add something to that, Mark, because I think it's really important, because I've had people in the mining industry say to me, well, we just need to trust each other. And I may trust them, and I have deep trust for the people on this call, having worked with them. But how often does a mining company CEO change, or an NGO CEO, or our leadership? And so I think it's about integrity of. You need a system. You need something to have the transparency, and it needs to be credible and trusted, and so that we could all walk away from this screen and from this exercise, and it would still be trusted. That's the goal. It doesn't matter if people. I hope people trust me, but it doesn't really matter ultimately. What matters is that what we leave behind, the legacy, is trusted.
And the other part I just want to add to that, and again, Tiffany is doing this, is that verification process isn't just some unemotional, accounting thing that we've added to it. That's the storytelling. We can bring to the process of what we really do and how we go about really doing it, and how many people help us do it. So by the time it gets to the consumer, it's back to Anisa's ultimate collaboration all the way along the way. And the collaboration was the idea to bring you something ethical, to bring you something that we're proud of. And that's really happening. And it's probably the most exciting thing happening in terms of a change to the industry at this point in time.
Extending that idea of collaboration, we have some questions from the audience that Lisa, I'll just plop in the first one, and then you can take over if you'd like to facilitate that part. So one of the questions is that there was a similar question in the earlier session about accessibility to some of these, some of the corporate sponsored, organized solutions to bringing ASM or unique materials like salmon gold, in this case, the question applies to market. The material then goes through corporate channels. And some of the participants in the jewelry supply chain, independent designers, mid-sized companies, don't get to participate in those solutions because we need multiple solutions to deal with scale and deal with marketing and deal, all these various pieces. So the real direct question is, will there be a way to make salmon gold available to independent designers, either in its pure form or mixed with certified recycled gold to extend the supply? And I'll give that to Steve first.
Okay. I was wondering who wants to take that, but I guess it's me. I think here's what I would say. When you start something like this up, you need someone with you and behind you, and you need to know someone will put the extra effort and energy and resource in to make it go. And so critical to turning the ignition switch on a project like this and all these kinds of projects is somebody willing to do that. And so that's, in my view, why Tiffany and Apple have access at market prices to that gold. But that's the beginning of the story. That's like chapter 1, right? Success is chapter 2 and 3. And chapter 2 is us finding ways and finding interested parties who want access to salmon gold and restoration gold and things that might be called peace diamonds, for example. Those kinds of things, I think, should be shared value. We're going to need to keep relying on the companies, Richline and others too, who can, De Beers and others who can boost these things. But I think it only works. I love salmon gold, but I'm not interested in niche plays. I'm interested in scale. And so the question really is in chapter 2, how do we turn that? And then chapter 3, how does it become part of what the industry is doing so none of us have to be involved anymore? So the answer is yes. It's just a matter of it's a timing question, nothing more. I don't know if you would agree, Anissa, but that's the way I see it.
I would absolutely agree. And I think you framed that perfectly, Steve. I think the good news here, and this came up in the earlier panel as well, is that there is more demand out there. There's so much demand and we're not able to meet demand yet. So that's the good news. And we're still, even though in many cases, right, we've been working on these issues for 20 years now, we are still in some cases in the early stages of development. And I'm just really excited because I know that we all around the screen today have seen so much progress and evolution so quickly in just short spurts of time that I can only imagine where we're going to be in, frankly, a year or 2 or even 3 years.
And I'll just say, anybody who's interested, I can't give you supply. There's literally, I was watching the gold's leaving the Yukon as we speak. It's in the Yukon too this morning. But let me know, because we're going to make that pivot. And I'd like to know who's interested, because that helps me figure out what that pivot looks like.
Very exciting. Lisa, would you like to?
Sure. I'm looking at a rather perplexing question, actually. This person is asking I believe, what percentage for artisanal miners, what percentage of IRMA guidelines would be reasonably acknowledged for the jewelry sector? It is a perplexing question. I think perhaps it is getting at the transferability or applicability of accords and agreements for one sector being applicable to another.
I'm not 100% sure what the question is asking, but I think I would say a few things. One, Amy Boulanger, who you mentioned, Lisa, and the team at IRMA and all of the IRMA steering committee members are so open to conversation and dialogue. So if there's a specific question that was missed in the way it was read, please engage with IRMA directly. I think the second is that what is so beautiful about IRMA, right, is it's about transparency and it's about engagement and that ongoing dialogue, something that we're all doing in our own respective ways to improve our practices, the industry's practices, supply chain, to improve the world, right? So, I think that without giving you a specific percentage, because I don't have that answer, because it's all new, and I think every company might handle things differently. I think that just getting engaged, just trying. I'm really excited about all the companies, as Steve mentioned, that are going through the IRMA audit, because that just shows like, hey, I might not be perfect, but I'm going to see where we are. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to engage in dialogue with my customers and all of my stakeholders.
Yeah, so I just add that some of the other standards, Fairmined and Craft, these are great standards, and there's a lot of harmonization with IRMA. It may not be quite as exhaustive in some areas, but in terms of paying in particular attention, particularly to human rights, And there's quite a bit of harmonization. It might be a smaller code, but it's not a less impactful code. And reading those is equally as important as reading the War and Peace novel that Irma is.
Yeah.
Well,
and
in the medicine dialogue, to Denise's point, that was where we said we need to do this in harmony. Like, if you have transparency in large scale money, you have to have it in small scale money. If you have environment, you have to have environment. You know, it's different, like it applies differently, right? But the same thematic areas or principles are present in both sets of standards in my last read, which was not very recently. Lisa, sorry.
And it's also important that standards are tailored to the realities of the supply chain. And Irma is focused on the large scale, and that's why specific standards related to ASM sector are so important, like the Mendeleev Diamond Standard, Steve, right? Or Fair Trade and Mind, which have been mentioned. But Irma also focuses on the intersection of LSM and ASM as well.
Yeah, we've gotten a bit of clarity on that question. And so I wanted to clarify something for the asker. The IRMA standard does not apply to artisanal mining. They are two completely separate ways of dealing with the challenges that we face. And what Anissa just mentioned, where the two activities overlap, where there is artisanal mining at the border of a large scale mine, or where there is a new mine proposed and there's already activity going on, what the IRMA standard does is it has some guidelines written into it to address how you handle those particular scenarios in a responsible way. So it doesn't apply in that particular case. The one concern, people are often looking for what's best. Where am I the best, most ethical participant in this scenario? And within that, just say for the record, there is a bias that large scale mining is worse and artisanal mining is better. And so that's a perception in the field. So one of the concerns is that if large scale mines have IRMA, will that recognition of responsible mining overshadow the efforts on ASM? And we need it all. So Anissa, I'm curious how you would respond to that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because anyone that has heard me, or frankly, Mike speak, knows that at Tiffany & Company, we believe that for a sustainable future for precious metals includes sourcing from responsible large scale mines, right? That's where IRMA comes in, and small scale mines, as well as recycled sources, right? The artisanal mining community, as we heard before, as we're hearing now, is such an important source of economic development for so many people, for so many communities around the world when it's operating at best practice. So this is an area from the Tiffany & Company perspective that we're hoping to grow. So it's important to us. And also, we can, going back to your first question to Mike, we can use the power of our voice and our brand if we are sourcing responsibly from all three sectors. So it's not one to the exclusion of another for Tiffany & Company, at least.
I just wanted to chime in on that. I think that's an incredibly important point. And Christina and I have a conversation often about where does your gold come from? And that array and recognizing the existence of the array is something that, or the choices, I think often gets eclipsed in the conversation today. So I think it's really great that you've articulated that and that Tiffany stands for that. So I'm going to go to the next question, if I may. And that is, sorry, they come in on my phone. Okay. What happened to my Mercury question?
Yes. I was going to make a joke, if I can interject. When Mike departed as chairman and CEO of Tiffany & Company, there was a quote in the New York Times that said he wanted to become an environmental activist and get arrested. Are people not curious if that's happened?
Has it happened?
No, we'll see what happens. I'm saving myself for Pebble. If it doesn't die within the next couple of weeks, then that's where I'm headed.
Well, I just want to add one thing to that. Like, I've met a lot of advocates and campaigners in my day, and Mike's a pretty damn good campaigner. and I think he set the path. I mean, I think I view the world today as very, like, there's a lot of what I would call campaigning companies. Some of them campaign better than the NGOs. And Tiffany led that trend. And that's, I think, a good thing for the world.
If I may, I'm going to shift back. And the way this is phrased as, and I quote, to any of these extraordinary industry luminaries, what do you see as possible next steps, ways the jewelry might address this is about the immense scale of mercury pollution by ASM mining. And I put that out there.
I can give you the answer. I can't necessarily tell you where we're there, but the answer is solve it, eliminate it. We have to do this. That from initiatives like Toby's to things like Dow Chemical and the bigger companies, we have to find a solution to replacing mercury. And I can tell you, as one of those that was a little bit over the top, when we won't deal with anybody that any mine where there's mercury involved, that became a little bit of an unfair statement and started eliminating people we didn't intend to eliminate. So the answer is there's a solution. We've got to find it, and we've got to look at it in multiple disciplines, from the large chemical companies to the small gravity-driven teachers of some of the things that are working out there right now. And again, Toby preceded Anissa, and for a very good reason, because that's his mission in life. So I'm talking about Toby Pomeroy, for those of you that don't know. So I might be a little bit overly optimistic, but we can solve it. We can get rid of it.
Can I just add one quick point on that? Fariel brought it up on the previous panel. It's all about, in my view, it's about the finance. It's about small scale miners being dependent on mercury financially, and you need to break that chain. And it's happening. To Mark's point, it can be done, but the solutions have to target the provider of the mercury and the trading and the finance of the upstart of the ASM operations. That's where the solutions lies. The technologies exist. It's just that's where the focus, in my view, has to be.
I just wanted to amplify on something Mark said, which is, for those of you that may not be familiar, Toby Pomeroy, who has been an important trailblazer, has committed himself to something that is called the Mercury Free Mining Challenge. And that is an example of an initiative that is driven by one very powerful person. And actually, Toby, Mark was referencing, Toby actually was the first recipient of IAC's Award for Leadership in Responsible Practice. And he is greatly loved and respected.
So our guides are giving us the signal that we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I think we do. And yes. So question 4 is connecting single source stones or regional sourced that are specifically working on people, planet, product, benefit initiatives. This is actually more of a statement, I guess, or how is more light shown, more publicity on efforts such as Moyo, Gemfair, Bahia Gold? How do we, if you will, shine the light on these initiatives and further their flourishing. And hopefully a conversation like this is one of the ways to do that.
As the marketing guy, I can say that I just made this up. A rising tide raises all ships. You can quote me on that. And I think it's one of the other industry challenges that we as an industry need to get together and celebrate these types of small successes so that they can be grown the same way we do, no offense, Ferial Diamond is Forever and all the category marketing and everything else we're doing. I think that it's time that the category be best practices, that the category be the successes of programs like this. Moyo is an amazingly great precedent. So, we know a lot of these things within at least our small group within our industry. I mean, it starts with let's make it part of the entire industry, and then let's get it outside of that. And it's a luxury magazine, all these magazines that feature you. I'm expecting you to be on the cover, hugging a couple of the women from Moyo Gems next time. So, I honestly, we've got to get better at talking about the successes that we have as a responsible, ethical group of people in an industry that's innately exactly that.
Well, that might be an appropriate transition into, if you will, this last segment of the program, which is, and we're doing this in novel ways because we are in challenging times, but everybody here wants to meet the challenge. I'm really thrilled that we've been able to explore both 2 decades of leadership, but also to discuss recategorization so that what we are looking at is what is purpose-driven, what is a successful initiative based on standards that are established, if you will, rather than large or small. And that guiding principle is part of the way it's determined that that this award is presented each year. It's for the worth of the work and the person, be the entity or initiative large or small. And I am truly thrilled. I only wish that I could hand it through space to present to Anissa Costa, Initiatives in Art and Culture's 2020 award for leadership in responsible practice in jewelry. This is an absolute thrill. Bravo.
Your trophy.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to pick up this gorgeous award that you sent over so that everyone can see it. Here, I'll put it closer. Hopefully you can just see the care with which Lisa, Christina, and the team put into this.
So obviously unusual times. So we have the recipient presenting to us so that we can view the award. And artisanry is at the core of that award. It is hand calligraphied, and there is, thanks to Hoover and Strong, a nugget of Fairmined gold on it. And the frames hand built, the gessoed and then gilded. And In my view, and I think in Christina's as well as the committee, the preceding conversation amply demonstrates some of the many reasons that Anissa is such an appropriate recipient of this award. And it's particularly fitting that some of those who've played such a significant role in Tiffany & Company's journey and who have known Anissa for so long, Steve, Mark, Mike, are also here in what is a virtual close embrace. And one of the things I'd like to note is that the confluence of the 20th year of the Tiffany & Company Foundation, not incidentally, coincides with the 50th anniversary of Earth Day as a phenomenon. And it is also the 15th anniversary of the Responsible Jewelry Council. And Tiffany & Company and De Beers, and the recipient of this award last year was Fariel Zariki from De Beers, who was with us in the previous segment. Both were founding members and clearly both received the award. So we're honored that the stars aligned, and Iris van der Vecken, who is at the helm of the RJC, is another really extraordinary person. So on behalf of Christina and the other members of the award committee, and they include Tiffany Stevens, Monica Stevenson, and Monica is particularly tied to some of the endeavors that we've been discussing, and Ronnie van der Linden, and our unofficial members, like Mark and previous recipients. I'm truly honored and delighted to reaffirm the presentation of Initiatives in Art and Culture's 2020 Award for Leadership in Responsible Practice in Jewelry to Anissa Costa. Bravo, I love you.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. I have to say, it actually has been an overwhelming day and definitely week. It's just such a wonderful recognition. I have to begin by thanking Lisa for her over 20 years of effort with Initiatives in Art and Culture, and in particular, 10 years of the Gold Conference, and for bringing this amazing community together. So thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Christina, and the rest of the awards committee for this honor. I'm really humbled to join such an impressive cohort of previous recipients, which Lisa and Mark spoke to. But I think something I really, really want to stress is that I'm proud to accept this award and really represent the many, many Tiffany employees and departments, both now and over the years, that have been a part of our efforts to create and to foster positive social and environmental impact within our value chain. So this award is really for every Tiffany employee, past and present. And I know Mike would agree with me on that. And I've been so lucky and so thankful to have been able to work for Mike and to, have been a partner, not in crime, but a partner in good, or whatever you want to call it, over many, many years. I also just want to say on a day-to-day basis that I've had the privilege of working alongside Tiffany employees at every level of the company, right across the globe, to advance these responsible practices so that we can achieve our sustainability goals. And also in the field more broadly, it's just so important to me to thank the amazing colleagues that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years, some of which we've heard from today and are on the screen, but your friendship and the fact that you truly are colleagues as well has meant the world to me. And cross-sector collaboration and partnership is more critical now than ever. I think we all know that. So together, we all really have the opportunity to continue to make a difference on some of the most important issues of our time. And I truly believe, I know that we all know, that the jewelry industry plays a pivotal role in continuing to create positive impact in the world. So thank you so much. Thank you.
There is a moment, if anyone else would like to chime in, please do feel free.
Awful lot of confluence of events, 10th anniversary of the Gold Council, 20th and 30th and 15th and so forth. So the stars are aligned, and we're very proud of you, Anissa. Thank you for being the poster child of everything good and right within the industry.
Let me also add that while Anissa was her characteristically humble self, and certainly everyone at Tiffany deserves a share of the credit, Anissa deserves the lion's share for making it happen on a day-to-day basis for the past 20 years. Thank you, Anissa.
And I'd just like to add to that to say that it's just wonderful to work with Anissa. I'm so proud of her and glad she received this award. And it's just kind of, you know, it's like the cherry on top of all that Tiffany has done. And she's wearing the jacket to match the cherry on top analogy. So that wasn't planned. But I also do want to say that, you know, the little things matter. And with Tiffany and with Anissa, you know, it's important to recognize the progress we're making, but sometimes the little interventions and the picking up the phone at the right time and pushing something at the right moment really matter. And so I really appreciate all the little things that don't get recognized and talked about in calls like this, Zoom calls like this, Anissa, because you do them and it matters. So thank you.
Thank you all. I don't even have words, just a big smile and a very heartfelt thank you.
Well, I think we've come to the close of this session and wonderful event. Our tapes, the Zooms are available to view as you wish, when you wish. And Anissa, we will give you a copy of this for whatever purposes you wish to use it for. And I want to say, first off, to everyone who has joined us from all over the world, because you really are here from all over the world, thank you. It's one of my most pleasurable tasks is to say thank you. And to all of you who joined, I mean, I can't tell you how much it means to have Mark, Mike, Steve, Anissa, and Christina together. It's absolutely an overwhelming experience for me, very meaningful. And, you know, everybody, it is possible to go forward. Sometimes it seems like it's so dark, but it is possible to go forward. And in closing, I'd also like to mention my gratitude to De Beers for really the partnership in birthing this child of COVID, because we've committed to this monthly series, and their partnership and encouragement has really meant the world. So I express my thanks to them, to our other sponsors, of course, throughout the year. I don't want to shift the focus to that sort of thing too much, but I do want to say that with everybody working together, we accomplish so much more. And it is so much better to go forward with love. So I wish everybody the very best. Anissa, congratulations and thank you for absolutely everything that you have done and that you will do.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, Christina, and everyone.
For me, the same message that my kids and grandkids and everybody else gets, right, Lisa? Be gooder.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
I live by it myself. So
congrats, Anissa.
Thanks. It's so hard to say goodbye, so we won't. Until next time.
Until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.